Hi all, good evening. This week's question is, what is the difference between impediment and a blocker? Impediment and a blocker are similar, but there are a few differences between them, and we see that these two are used interchangeably. An impediment, I can say it is a kind of event that will impede any developers from working to their anticipated sprint capacity. For example, it will slow the progress of the work in that particular sprint. But a blocker is a situation where work has been completely halted on any particular work item which you have assigned, and it will completely stop the progress of the work. Without eliminating that particular issue or blocker, the work cannot be progressed further. In general, we can say all blockers are kind of impediment, but all impediment are not blockers. For example, if PO is on long vacation or anything, and if there is no backlog ready and you don't have the details about the requirement for that particular sprint, then it is a kind of blocker. But there are some alternative managed or planned during his absence, and you have a kind of like minimal requirement to facilitate that particular sprint, then it is a kind of impediment. There will be slow in the progress of our sprint, but we can not say that is a kind of blocker. And technical depth is also one form of a impediment, and you can see that there is slow in our progress, and we cannot complete that particular task. For example, if any particular tool which your developer is working on, or they are depending on that particular software or application for their day-to-day activities to implement the code, then that will completely stop the progress, or you will not be having like further what to do until that tool comes up. So that I can tell it as a blocker. And for impediment, what exactly is, as an example, if something is not working as a functionality and that it is slowing down the progress of your work item, so this can be considered as a impediment.
So let's understand the difference between an impediment and a blocker with the help of an example. So let's say there are two Scrum teams, wherein my Scrum team is dependent on another team. We are working on an API wherein the result is going to come from the next and the final Scrum team. Now we are going to hit the API of the other team and then show the result on my front end. Now, if the arrangement is that they would give us the result by, let's say, after mid of the sprint has passed, this would definitely be an impediment or a risk. Now the reason for that is the word impediment, it comes from the root word of impede, which is like I might be able to make progress, but my progress is going to be slowed, which means if I was working on the same API end to end, I would be able to control all the factors within my team. If someone goes on vacation, if there is a dependency on technology, if there is a dependency on hardware, server, ABC, etc., I would be able to control it within my team. But because there is another team involved, and my output depends on how they progress, it's an impediment. So for that, I would be tracking it as a risk day in and day out, talking to one of the representative from the other team every day and inquire about the progress of their team. Meanwhile, I will try and do something within my scope, within my application, to mock up the same functionality so that I'm able to replicate and at least execute few of the test cases. I will not be able to execute or end-to-end implement the complete functionality, but at the same time, I should be able to progress, let's say 50 to 60%. Now, while my progress will be slowed because this is an impediment, In case the other team tells me that they are unable to produce the working up and running API by the end of the sprint, now this becomes a blocker for my user story. The reason for this impediment to be converted into a blocker is, while earlier I was able to make progress, albeit slow or whatever pace it was, but today when the other team tells me that they are not able to produce the final API, whatever progress I might have made, end to end, a working up and running, valuable, usable API to give the results as expected on my front end, they will not be able to. I will not be able to replicate that on my front end, and hence it becomes a blocker. Why? Because now my user story is blocked, and hence is the difference between an impediment and a blocker. With impediment, I would be able to make progress, but it would be definitely a risk for me. With a blocker, that risk converts into an issue, and hence a blocker. Now, because it's a blocker, I might be able to work out with the other team saying, okay, if one of your critical resource has stepped out for whatever number of reason, let me help you. Let's make progress together, and let's resolve or break this blocker somehow, so that it's a win-win situation and we are able to produce results. If it's a problem with the particular error that they are not able to resolve, technology that they are not adept in, maybe few of my team members can step in, we can do a troubleshooting session and then resolve this particular issue. So as a team we might be able to resolve, but that's the basic difference between an impediment and a blocker.
So today's question is, what is difference between blocker and an impediments? So as we all know, Scrum Masters serve development team in removing project impediments that stand in the way of teams productivity and performance. Now let's see what is difference between blocker and impediment. So an impediment is an event that impedes any of the developers from working to their anticipated sprint capacity. Uh, an impediment slows down the progress of the work. A blocker refers to a situation where work has completely halted or stopped on an item and cannot progress without eliminating the issue. A blocker is actually stopping work for continuing for a work item. So a blocker might be an issue or a bug which you have come across during development or testing, and which is not allowing you to develop or test further. So here it's completely the work is completely stopped. We cannot proceed further until and unless that development or that issue or that bug gets resolved. So mm, uh, uh, an impediment is basically an impediment basically slows down the progress, but a blocker halts progress. So all blockers are impediments, but not all the impediments are blockers. Also, like impediments slow down your team's velocity. So let's look at an example of impediments and blocker. Suppose you have a requirement of creating a button on a UI page, but the naming of that UI button or the label of that button is not yet confirmed. So in this case, it's like you can develop the button and you can proceed your work further. Still you don't have the naming or the label of that button yet confirmed, but you can proceed your work. It will not stop you from the development of the work. So this is considered as an impediment. The other example of impediment is basically sick leave or unplanned leave of the developers. So suppose one of your team member is taking sick leave. So in this case, it's not like your team's work will get stopped completely. The work will continue. It might be possible if for the person who is taking leave, for his or her task the work gets slows down, and he or she needs to take some more time uh, to complete that work. But it's not like that, that work has completely stopped and we cannot proceed further with the with our activities or with the team's development. Now let's look at an example of blockers. So no backlog is is an example of blocker. If we don't have any backlog, then team will not proceed for the work, because as the team don't have any work, no backlog, then how they can proceed for the development or any work. The other example of blocker is dependency on the third party, and also technical environment issues are the example of blockers. Suppose now we have a requirement of integrating our application with one of the third party application, but the third party is not ready to provide the server on on time. They are asking you have to wait for a month, and after that only they can provide the server. So in this case, the work will completely get stopped, because until and unless we cannot get the server from the third party, we cannot proceed with the integration, or we cannot proceed with our work. So this is an example of blocker, because here our work is completely stopped. Thank you.
Hi all. So for this week question, what is the difference between obstacle and impediment? Okay, obstacle is also a kind of barrier which is stopping me to progress further. Okay, which is not letting me to move forward to achieve my goal, but it is a temporary one. I can overcome this or surmount this easily as soon as possible. Okay, on the other hand, impediment is the one which we can apply for any task. It is a kind of permanent one which cannot be overcome, or which is very tough to overcome. Okay, so impediment is, again I said, permanent. Either it will be very tough to overcome, or we have to look out the other way around, how it works, how we can make this situation, or how we can align on this and we try to reach our goal. Okay, that way we can work it out. So obstacle is something we can overcome. That is the difference, main difference between obstacle and impediment. If I want to highlight this with my personal example, that means my personal life, when I was about to join my previous organization after my college, my brother met an accident. Okay, we had a huge financial loss since he was bedridden for 2.5 years and had so many operations. We had huge financial loss. Okay, that time our plan is that, okay, so I am done with my college, my brother done with his college, so that we thought we can build a home that time. But this obstacle made not letting us to progress further. Okay, so we had a great financial loss and we overcome that somehow nowadays. Okay, on the other hand, the impediment is that on that major accident, it was so many operation was happened. So on that operation, my brother's legs was not proper, and again it's the length of the legs are not same. Okay, so he has to wear some different kind of shoes which can be ordered and we can make it. We can't get the regular one and we can't wear it. So that is a kind of impediment what I'm facing, but we found some workaround. Okay, however, it is a thing which is impediment for him. Okay, so obstacle, the financial loss we could overcome and we are okay now somehow. But this impediment is something which we had permanently. His leg is not proper still after 10 years. It's been 10 years, more than 10 years. But still, it's like not in the same length. So he has to wear some other different variety of shoes, that kind of slippers or that thing. Okay, so this is a kind of impediment. Okay, I hope this example help you to differentiate what is obstacle and what is an impediment. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Impediment is something which slows down the pace of the team. Even though you proceed with the impediment, you still can generate something which is equal to waste. To the contrast of it, blocker is something you cannot really proceed further at all, you cannot advance at all. If you see some examples of impediments and blockers, illness of a team member, unavailability of a product owner, lots of technical debt, unforeseen situations could be the examples of impediments. And from the blocker perspective, a developer is doing a development. If he sees that he encountered an issue or an error, or if he found that the respective plugin is not there for him to proceed further, he cannot literally move further. That is a totally blocker for him. And from the QA side, if he is doing testing and he encountered any issue or a defect or a bug, he cannot move further. He is totally blocked with the testing.
Hi all, this is Keerti here, and today's question is, what is the difference between a blocker and an impediment? So I would like to say that blocker is a kind of impediment with which you cannot move ahead. Let's say, suppose I'll give an example of a blocker and an impediment. So our environments were working really slow, but it was not a blocker, though it was an impediment because it was slowing the team down, but still the work was not completely blocked and team were actually able to move ahead with development. But after 3 days, since the logs were cleaned and the space were cleared and a lot of actions took place, but still after 3 days, there was some other SSO login issue due to which the environment completely stopped. Nobody could log in even. So it was completely stopped working, and then we raised the issue to the SSO team. So that was basically a blocker. The impediment eventually became a blocker because the team were not able to test their code further, and post development the developed code was actually of no use because the work eventually stopped and we could not test it, and since it was not tested, it was not deliverable. So that is the difference between an impediment and a blocker. So to handle both the things, it is very, very important that we escalate. If we don't action on it as even the development team member or an agility lead or a scrum master or whosoever, it will eventually lead to a lot of churn because a lot of stories will not be completed and the commitment percentage of this team would lower down. The team morale would be lower because they are working really hard to make it done, but due to external factors or due to internal factors, they are not able to proceed to a shippable product because of the impediment or a blocker. So that's the main difference. So with impediment, it is actually something which team can still move ahead, but eventually we would be needing some action on it to make it a shippable product. But blocker is something which is totally, completely blocking the team's work and the teams cannot move ahead. Hope I have been clear with my answer. Thank you very much. Have a good day.